Don't touch me. His voice was barely a breath, broken, drowning in blood. Leave me here. Rosa Medina looked at the man dying in the mud at her feet. 3 bullets, his own guards gone, his own house dark, and one name blinking on his shattered phone screen, his son's name next to a message that read, confirmed, clean. She had scrubbed this man's floors for 11 years. She had been invisible in his house, in his world, in his life. She pressed her hands against his chest anyway. Not tonight, she said. Subscribe. Hit that bell. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Don't touch me. Those were the first words Dante Caruso said to her. 3 bullets in his body, face down in the mud, blood soaking through his shirt so fast it looked black in the dark. And the first thing out of his mouth was a command. Rosa Medina had worked for this man for 11 years. She knew his voice in every register, cold, quiet, impatient, the particular low tone he used right before someone got hurt. She had never heard it like this, raw, scraped hollow. A man giving orders because giving orders was the only thing left of him. She pressed her jacket against the wound in his side anyway. You don't get a vote right now, she said. He tried to move. His body refused him completely, and she felt the shudder that went through him when he understood that the full-body recognition of a powerful man discovering he had nothing left to be powerful with. Who are you calling? He rasped. The one who won't ask questions. I said, and I heard you. She kept her hands exactly where they were. You said leave you here. I'm choosing not to. You can fire me when you're not dying. He went quiet, not because he agreed, because he had run out of the energy to argue, and they both knew it. Rosa looked up at the house. Every window dark, the gatehouse empty. 11 years and she had never seen this property without armed men on the grounds, not at midnight, not at 3 a.m, not on Christmas. The absence hit her harder than the blood had, harder than the body on the ground, because that absence was not an accident. Someone had cleared the house before they shot him, someone who knew exactly how to do it. She dialed her nephew. Miguel answered on the 3rd ring, voice thick with sleep. Tia, it's 2 in the East Service Road. Your truck, right now. What, Wyam? Lone Miguel. Tell no one, not a word to anyone, you understand me. A long pause, she could hear him waking up, the sleep falling away, replaced by something younger and more frightened. Tia, are you safe? She looked at the man bleeding into the mud. Come fast, she said and hung up. 19 minutes. She had 19 minutes and she used every one of them. She talked about nothing, about the garden drain she'd been meaning to report for a week, about a recipe she'd been saving, about her daughter's upcoming school presentation. Her voice low and even, a rope thrown into the dark. She didn't know if he could hear her. She talked anyway, because silence was the sound of giving up, and Rosa Medina had not come this far in life by giving up. At one point he said something. Just one word, quiet enough that the rain nearly swallowed it. She leaned closer. What? Why? He said. Why what? A long beat. Why are you still here? Because you have a pulse, she said, and I don't waste those. He made a sound. It might have been a laugh. It might have been pain. With a man like Dante Caruso, she suspected those two things had always lived close together. When Miguel's headlights swept the service road, Rosa stood and waved him down. He got out of the truck, took 3 steps and stopped. He stared at the man on the ground. Is that, his voice cracked. Tia, is that Senor Caruso? Help me lift him. That is Dante Caruso. Miguel, the Dante Caruso. He wasn't moving. His feet had stopped working. Tia, do you understand who that man is, what he does, what happens to people who... He is alive, Rosa said. Right now, in this moment, he is alive. In 40 minutes, he may not be. You and I are the only people who know where he is, which means you and I are the only people who can make a choice right now. She held her nephew's eyes. I've already made mine. Miguel's jaw worked. He looked at the man on the ground, at his aunt, back at the man. The mathematics of it moving behind his eyes, the risk, the weight of it, the thing you can't take back once you do it. This is going to change everything, he said. I know. For you, for me, I know, Miguel. Her voice was not unkind. I know exactly what this is. Help me lift him. He crossed the distance in 4 steps and got his arms under Dante's shoulders, and they lifted together, and the sound that came out of the man between them, involuntary ragged cut short, was the most human sound Rosa had ever heard from him in 11 years. They drove east, not toward any hospital. Rosa had made that calculation in the mud and dismissed it. A hospital meant intake records. And intake records meant that whoever had done this would know by morning that Dante Caruso's body hadn't been found where they left it. She had a cousin, Graciela. Former nurse, currently ran an alteration shop, never slept more than 4 hours, and had a gift for appearing to ask no questions while actually cataloging every detail of a situation with the precision of a trained professional. Graciela was already at the door when the truck pulled up. She took one look, stepped back, said kitchen table. That was all. She worked for 2 hours, didn't speak except once without looking up from what she was doing. Second bullet's still in. Can't go after it here. He needs a real surgeon. Can he make it through tonight? Rosa asked. Graciela's hands didn't stop moving. Probably. Then we get through tonight. And after that I figure out the next thing. Graciela looked up. Her eyes were steady and dark and full of something that wasn't quite pity, more like the particular clear-eyed regard of a woman who has seen her share of impossible situations and understands that arguing with them is a waste of energy. You know what you've done, she said. It was not a question. I know what I'm doing, Rosa said. That's what matters. At 4:17 in the morning, Dante Caruso came back. Not gently. Men like him never came back to consciousness. Gently, he surged up from the dark, gay, like a man who'd been drowning. One hand shooting out and grabbing the edge of the kitchen table before anyone could react. His eyes open and burning and already scanning the room with the reflex of a man who has spent 30 years making sure every room he wakes up in is one he can survive. He saw Graciela, didn't recognize her. His eyes moved. He saw Miguel against the far wall. Stopped. He saw Rosa. He stared at her for a long moment. She watched him work through it where he was, who these people were. What the last thing he remembered was why the woman who ironed his shirts was standing in an unknown kitchen at 4 in the morning, watching him breathe. You moved me, he said. Yes. I told you not to. You did. So why? We've already had this conversation, she said. You lost. Something shifted in his face. Not softness, she didn't think that mechanism still worked in him, but something adjacent to it, a kind of recalibration. Where am I, Weho? Somewhere safe, that's all you need right now. I need to know what you need, she said, is to not pull those stitches out by sitting up too fast. Lie back. He looked at her. She looked at him. She realized the first time in 11 years they had ever actually looked at each other. Not employer and employee, not powerful man and invisible woman, but two people in a kitchen at 4 in the morning with the full weight of a dangerous situation between them and nowhere to put it. He lay back. My phone, he said. Graciela's son has it. He's trying to restore it. Who? 16 years old, very gifted. You don't need to know his name. She sat down in the chair beside him. Tell me who did this. The silence that followed was long enough that she thought he'd decided not to answer. Then, how many men did you see? 3, she said. I heard a car. By the time I got there, they were gone. From inside the gate. Yes. He closed his eyes, opened them again. The guards on tonight's rotation. Did you recognize them? I recognized 2. The third one, the one at the East Post, I'd never seen before. How long had he been there? She thought about it. 3 weeks, maybe 4. A muscle in his jaw moved. Yes, he said quietly. That's right. 4 weeks. He was doing the math in his head. She could see it working backward, through time, through decisions, through the slow, patient architecture of a plan that had been building right next to him while he looked the other way. Someone inside, she said. Yes. Someone who knew your schedule, your rotation, knew which guards could be bought and which ones could be replaced. He looked at her. You're very observant for a housekeeper. I'm very observant for a person, she said. Most people in your world just don't notice. At 6:45, Graciela's son appeared in the doorway holding the reconstructed phone in both hands like it was something that might bite him. He was a slight kid, serious-faced, wearing headphones around his neck. It's running, he said. There's a lot of messages, but there's one. He hesitated. Looked at Rosa. She nodded. Say it. He held the phone out so she could read the screen. She read it. Her face didn't change. She had trained her face over 53 years not to change in moments when changing it would cost her something. Then she turned to Dante. There's a message, she said, from a contact listed as V. It says confirmed, clean. Next phase begins tonight. The room went very still. She watched his face, watched the message land in it, watched something that she had no word for, not pain, not rage, not shock, something older and heavier than all of those things settled behind his eyes, like sediment dropping to the bottom of deep water. V, she said. He didn't answer. Who is V, Mr. Caruso? Still nothing. The next phase begins tonight, she said. That means there is a plan already moving. That means whoever V is, they believe this is finished. They believe you're in the ground. She leaned forward slightly. So I need you to tell me who V is, because whatever happens next, I am involved now, whether I want to be or not, and I do not walk into things blind. Dante Caruso looked at the ceiling of Graciella's kitchen, and then he said two words that changed every single calculation in the room. My son. The silence afterward was not empty. It was the kind of silence that has weight and shape, the silence of a thing that is too large to respond to immediately, that has to be sat with for a moment before the mind can move around it. Miguel made a sound from the corner. Swallowed it. Rosa said nothing. Because she was thinking fast, thinking back, pulling threads she hadn't known she was collecting. A phone call she'd overheard 8 months ago. A name repeated twice in a conversation that stopped the moment she walked into the room. A look that had passed between two men at a dinner she'd served, a look that at the time she'd filed away as nothing, and that now rearranged itself into something completely different. Victor, she said. Dante's eyes moved to her face sharply. You know him. I've heard the name, once or twice in rooms where people didn't know I was listening. She held his gaze. How long? How long what? How long has he been planning this? A pause. 4 years, he said. At least 4 years, probably longer. And you knew. It was not an accusation, it was just a fact laid flat. His jaw tightened. I suspected. You suspected and you didn't. He's my son. The words came out rough, stripped like something torn rather than spoken. He is my son. And I thought. He stopped, pressed his lips together, looked away. Rosa understood. She didn't agree with it. She didn't forgive it. But she understood the particular blindness that comes from loving someone. You have built someone who carries your name and your face and the shape of your hands. The way that love can make you look at a thing that's coming and decide one more time that it isn't. The next phase, she said. What does that mean? What does he do next? He consolidates, Dante said. His voice was flat now, operational. The grief folding itself away behind the part of him that had survived this long by turning everything into a problem to be solved. He moves on the territories. The northern ports first, that's where the real money is. He'll take the lieutenants who are already with him and offer terms to the ones who aren't. Anyone who refuses, he stopped. How many men does he have? Enough. How much time do we have before tonight? He looked at the window, the gray morning light. 14 hours, he said, maybe less. Rosa sat with that number, 14 hours. In 14 hours, a man named Victor Caruso was going to make moves that would shake the foundation of half the city's criminal structure, and he was going to do it believing that the only person who could stop him was dead. She looked at Dante Caruso, the man on the kitchen table, pale stitched together, one bullet still inside him, barely functional and burning for the particular fury of someone who has been betrayed by the one person they should never have trusted. Can you move? She asked. I can move. I mean actually move, not just insist that you can. He met her eyes, and then slowly he pushed himself up from the table, his teeth clenched, every muscle in his body in open revolt, and sat upright. His color was terrible. His breathing was wrong, but he was upright. Yes, he said. Good. She stood. Because I need you functional. I need your mind, your contacts, the ones Victor doesn't know about, and I need you to think clearly, which means you need to eat something and you need to tell me everything. Every name, every location, everything you know about what he's built. He stared at Victor. And you're going to do what exactly? You're a housekeeper. I was a housekeeper, she said. As of 2 hours ago, I am something else. I haven't figured out the title yet. Miguel let out a sound from the corner that was half laugh, half horror. Dante Caruso looked at Rosa Medina for a long moment. This woman who had pressed her good jacket against his wound in the mud, who had made a phone call in the rain and driven across the city and sat beside him through the night and never once looked away from any of it. You have no idea what you're getting into, he said. No, she agreed, but neither does your son. She held his gaze. And I've had 11 years to learn things about you and your world that nobody knows I know. That's not nothing. A long beat. No, he said quietly. It's not. Outside the city was waking up. Trucks on the street, a dog barking 2 blocks over the distant sound of a train. Ordinary morning sounds, ordinary city sounds. The world moving forward on its usual tracks, completely unaware that in a small kitchen on the east side, the pieces of something enormous were beginning to shift. Victor Caruso believed the game was over. He had no idea it had just started. And he had no idea, not a flicker, not a shadow of suspicion, that the most dangerous move on the board was a 53-year-old woman in a wet coat who had 11 years of secrets filed away in a mind that nobody had ever thought to worry about. She picked up her phone. She looked at the message on Dante's screen one more time. Next phase begins tonight. Then we start now, she said. Rosa gave him 20 minutes to eat and to breathe and to be a man who had almost died before she pulled her chair directly in front of him and said, talk. Dante looked at the bowl of broth Graciela had put in his hands, like he wasn't sure what to do with something that simple. He had a bruise spreading up the left side of his jaw that hadn't been there an hour ago. She didn't know when he'd gotten it, didn't ask. He took one slow sip, set the bowl down. Victor started pulling people 2 years ago, he said. Not obvious, not all at once, small moves, a lieutenant here, a driver there. People I trusted but didn't watch closely enough because, he stopped, worked his jaw. Because they were around him since he was young, I thought that meant something. Who did he get to first? Sal Benedetto. Miguel made a sharp sound from the corner. Even he knew that name. Dante's eyes moved briefly to him, back to Rosa. Sal ran my northern operations for 12 years. If Victor has Sal, he has the ports, the warehouses, and 4 distribution routes I built from nothing. A pause. He has the money, the real money. Who else? Oh, Carmine Russo, my head of security. Rosa went still. Yes, Dante said, reading her face exactly right. That's why the guards were cleared. That's how they got through the gate. Carmine didn't just let them in. He planned the rotation, picked the date, put his own man at the east post. His voice stayed flat, but his hands tightened around the bowl until his knuckles showed white. I promoted Carmine myself, 11 years ago. Same time I started working here, Rosa said quietly. Something crossed his face at that. He didn't respond to it directly, but she watched him file it away. Who else do we have on his side? She asked. Those are the 2 that matter most. The others, he shook his head. Some follow because they believe in him. Some followed because they're afraid not to. A few because I've gotten old and they want to be on the winning side before the smoke clears. A long pause. That's how this works. That's always how this works. And who's left on yours? He was quiet for long enough that she felt the answer before he gave it. I don't know, he said. I genuinely don't know who I can trust anymore. That's what 4 years of slow rot does. You can't tell where the wood is solid until you put your foot through the floor. Rosa sat with that. There has to be someone. One person you would bet your life on. I'm already betting my life on a woman I pay to do my laundry, he said. My standards have adjusted. It was the closest thing to a joke she'd ever heard from him. It landed wrong and right at the same time, the way dark humor does when the dark is actually real. Think, she said, not the people around you, the people underneath. The ones Victor wouldn't have bothered with because they weren't important enough to recruit. He looked at her, and for the first time she saw something sharpen in his eyes that wasn't just pain or anger, something that looked like the beginning of a real thought. Petrov, he said slowly. Who? Nico Petrov. He runs a garage for me on the south side. Small operation chop shop storage. Nothing glamorous. Victor always called him a bottom feeder, wouldn't have wasted time on him. His voice was picking up something, not hope exactly, but the shape of a plan forming. Nico is the most loyal man I have ever known, and the least impressive looking. Victor would have walked right past him. Can you reach him? If his number is still in that phone, yes. Rosa turned to Graciella's son, who was still in the doorway, still holding the phone, still wearing the expression of someone who had profoundly underestimated what this morning was going to be. Find a contact named Petrov, she said. He looked at the phone, scrolled. Got it. Give it to him. She nodded at Dante. The boy crossed the room and handed the phone over with both hands, carefully the way you hand something to someone you are not entirely sure won't hurt you. Dante took it, dialed. It rang 4 times. A voice answered, rough, wary. Who is this? It's me, Dante said. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Jesus, Mary, and all the saints, they said you were dead. They were wrong. How wrong? Completely. Another pause. Longer. Rosa could hear the man on the other end breathing the rapid, recalibrating breath of someone whose entire understanding of the morning has just been overturned. Nico. Dante's voice dropped. I need to know where you stand. The man almost laughed. Boss, I've been sitting in this garage for 3 hours because Benedetto's people came by last night telling me operations were changing hands, and I had until noon today to decide if I was in or out. I didn't call because I didn't know who was safe to call. I've been sitting here deciding whether to disappear or burn the place down. A beat. Where do you think I stand? Something moved in Dante's face. Quiet. Deep. The specific relief of a man who has been alone with something terrible and suddenly isn't. Don't do either, he said. Stay exactly where you are. I'll be in touch in the next hour. Petrov stopped. Are you okay? Dante looked at the kitchen table he'd been lying on 2 hours ago. At Graciella's stitching on his side, at the woman sitting across from him who had pulled him out of the mud. I'm functional, he said. That's enough for now. He hung up. Rosa was already thinking 3 steps ahead. He can be a contact point. Someone Victor's people won't watch because they don't think he matters. She paused. You said Benedetto's people came to him. That means Victor is already moving ahead of tonight. He's not waiting. Dante's jaw set. He never could wait. Even as a boy, he'd decide something and the next moment he was already doing it no matter who told him to slow down. His voice was controlled, but there was something jagged underneath it now. I used to think that was strength. How many people know you use that garage? Rosa asked. 6 maybe? Victor? He might, I don't know. Then we can't use it as a base. We can use Petrov as a messenger, but we can't put you there. She stood, walked to the window. Not to look out. She knew better than to stand at windows right now, but because she needed to move while she thought, and moving helped. We need a location Victor has no knowledge of. Somewhere completely outside your world. And where exactly do you... My daughter's apartment, she said. The room went very quiet. Miguel stood up straight from the wall. Tia, absolutely not. She's in Riverside, she's in school, half the day, and she has a building with a locked parking garage and 2 exits. Rosa turned around. Victor Caruso does not know my daughter exists. He barely knew I existed. That was before you pulled his father out of the mud, Miguel said. His voice was tight. That was before you became a variable. Tia, if they find out, they won't find out if we move now and move smart. She looked at her nephew steadily. I am not being reckless. I am making a calculation. We need a location. I need Lucia somewhere I can see her. And that apartment is the only place in the city that is completely invisible to these people. She paused. We bring her in on it. She's 22. I was 22 when I came to this country alone with $40 and a phone number for a cousin I'd never met, Rosa said. 22 is old enough. Miguel had nothing to say to that because it was true, and he knew it. Dante had been watching this exchange with the focused attention of a man cataloging information. You'd bring your daughter into this, he said. Not a judgment. More like he was testing the weight of it. I'd bring her somewhere safe so I know where she is, Rosa said. That's different. She picked up her coat. I need an hour. Graciela, she turned to her cousin who had been standing at the edge of the room with her arms folded, monitoring all of this with the expression of a woman updating a very long internal ledger. Can he stay here until I get back? He's stitched and he's stable, and he's not my worst house guest, Graciela said dryly. Go. Rosa went. She called Lucia from the car. Her daughter picked up on the first ring, which meant she'd already been awake. Lucia was always awake early. She got that from her mother and resented it. Mama, it's 7 in the morning. I know. I need you to listen to me carefully and not ask questions until I'm done. A pause. Then with the particular tone of a young woman who has grown up with Rosa Medina as a mother and learned to recognize when the serious voice appears. Okay, Rosa told her, not everything, not the details that would frighten her past usefulness, but enough. Enough to explain why she needed to come to the apartment, why she was bringing a man who was injured, why Lucia needed to call in sick to her 9 o'clock class and make sure the parking garage door was unlocked. When she finished, the silence on the other end lasted exactly long enough to tell her that her daughter was scared. Then Lucia said, Is he going to get blood on my couch? Rosa almost smiled. Almost. I'll put something down. And you're sure, Mama, you're completely sure that no one followed you, that no one knows where? Not yet. That's why we have to move now before they start asking questions about who was on that property last night. Another silence, then quietly, Are you okay? I'm fine. You don't sound fine. I sound like someone who's been awake all night solving a problem, Rosa said. I'm fine. I'll see you in an hour. She made one more call before she got back to Graciela's. She called a woman named Esperanza, who had been Rosa's closest friend for 19 years and who, before she retired to manage her sister's restaurant, had spent 12 years as a paralegal for one of the most aggressive defense attorneys in the city. Esperanza knew people. More importantly, Esperanza knew the machinery behind the kind of men who lived in houses like Dante Caruso's, the way money moved and power shifted, and decisions got made and records got kept. I need information, Rosa said when Esperanza picked up, about a man named Victor Caruso. A long pause. Rosa. Esperanza's voice went careful. Why are you saying that name to me at 7 in the morning? Because I need to know what he's done. Legally, what's been filed, what's been dropped, who's represented him, what cases have come close and then gone away. She kept her voice even. I need to know what he has over people. Rosa, what is happening? Can you find that for me? I can find most of it, yes, but how fast? By tonight, probably. Rosa, find it fast, she said. I'll explain everything later. Right now, I just need you to pull on that thread and see what comes loose. She hung up and went back inside. Dante was sitting upright on his own now, which was either impressive or reckless, depending on how you looked at it. He had Graciela's son sitting across from him at the table, and they were doing something together with the phone, the old man pointing the boy, typing, the two of them communicating in the wordless shorthand of a shared task. Rosa stopped in the doorway. What are you doing? She asked. Accessing a secondary account, Dante said without looking up. Everything in my main system is compromised. Victor has had access for 2 years at minimum, but I set up a secondary communication channel 3 years ago. Paper trail only, no digital record. Even my own consigliere didn't know about it. Why did you set that up? He did look up then. Because I'm old and I've watched empires fall, he said. And I've always known that if mine fell, it would fall from the inside. A beat. I just didn't let myself know who the inside would be. Rosa crossed the room and looked at the screen. A list of numbers. No names attached to any of them. These are people I trust, he said. Not because I decided to trust them, because I've tested them over years in ways they didn't know were tests they passed. He looked at the list. 7 people. If Victor got to any of them, I'm out of moves. Can you reach them without triggering anything on Victor's end? Through Petrov. Yes, he's a relay point. Victor's people won't be watching a garage on the south side. He paused. Your plan about your daughter's apartment. It's the right call. She looked at him. It's the right call, he said again. And I want you to know if it goes wrong. If any of this touches her because of me. It won't, Rosa said flatly. But if it won't, She held his gaze. Because I'm not going to let it, and because I am very good at making sure things I cannot afford to lose don't get lost. She picked up her bag. Get ready to move. We leave in 20 minutes. Getting Dante Caruso into Miguel's truck a second time was harder than the first time. Because the first time he'd been mostly unconscious, and this time he was awake and trying to help, which paradoxically made it worse. He was taller than he looked lying down and wider in the shoulders, and every time he tried to take his own weight, he had to stop and reset and breathe through something that he was clearly not going to admit was pain. Stop helping, Rosa said. I'm not. You're compensating with your left side because the right side hurts. You're going to tear the stitching. Stop helping and let us do it. He stopped. She and Miguel got him in. He sat in the back seat instead of the truck bed this time, and Rosa got in beside him and Miguel drove, and for a while none of them said anything at all. Then Dante said quietly to no one in particular, "He called me last night." Rosa looked at him. "Victor, around 8 o'clock, he called and said he was checking in. We talked for maybe 4 minutes, nothing, just routine. How was the evening? Any news? The usual." His voice was remarkably even. "He called me 4 hours before his people shot me." The weight of that sat in the car between all of them. "He wanted to know where you were," Rosa said. "He wanted to make sure I was at the property. He asked if I was going out tonight, and I said no." A pause. I told him no, and he said, "Good, stay in. Get some rest." His jaw tightened. "Stay in. Get some rest." Miguel's hands flexed on the steering wheel. "Mr. Caruso," Rosa said. He looked at her. "I need you to feel that later," she said. "Right now, I need you to think." Something moved across his face, something that looked like gratitude and looked like grief and was probably both inseparably tangled, the way things get when they've been growing together for too long. "You're right," he said. "I know." She looked forward. "Think about tonight. Victor thinks the board is clear. He's going to move fast because he always does. And he's going to be confident because confidence is what he's been building toward for 4 years. That means he's going to make assumptions." She paused. "What does he assume about your allies? The ones he doesn't have?" Dante thought about it. "He assumes they'll fall in line when they see I'm gone. Or scatter. Either way, they're not a threat until they organize, and he'll move fast enough that they can't. So his vulnerability is timing," she said. "If someone who's supposed to be dead isn't dead. If the allies he thinks are leaderless suddenly hear a voice they recognize." She turned to look at him. "Can you call a meeting the 7 people on that list? Through Petrov, tonight. Victor will have people watching anyone he thinks might—" "Not at the restaurant," she said. "Esperanza's sister's restaurant. No one in your world has ever heard of it. We used to go there on Sunday afternoons." She paused. "It seats 40. We can have it closed for a private event. Casually. No warning. No patterns for anyone to see." Dante stared at her. "You've been planning this since you were in the mud," he said. "I've been planning this since I read that message at 6:45, she said. "The mud was earlier." He was quiet for a moment. "You're not what I thought you were." "No," she agreed. "I'm not." "What are you, Shaft?" She thought about it. "I'm the person you didn't see," she said, "for 11 years. And right now, that's exactly the right thing to be." They drove the rest of the way in silence, and Rosa kept her eyes moving, habit instinct, the careful vigilance of a woman who had learned long ago that the things that hurt you most were the things you stopped watching for. When they pulled into Lucia's building garage, her daughter was waiting by the door with her arms crossed and her chin up, and her eyes doing the very specific thing they did when she was frightened and refusing to look at. She looked so much like her mother that it hurt to see. She looked at Dante Caruso being helped out of the back seat, looked at the size of him, at the way he moved, careful and deliberate, the movement of a man managing pain, at the blood that had come through the wrapping on his side. Then she looked at her mother. "You said he was injured," she said. "You didn't say he was held together with hope and thread." "Graciella's stitching is very good," Rosa said. "Mama, he's stable. He needs to sit. He needs food, and we need your table." Rosa met her daughter's eyes. The whole conversation that passed between them in that look was a conversation that had no words in any language, just the deep, specific understanding between two women who had spent 22 years knowing each other completely. Can you do this? Lucia looked at Dante again. He was standing on his own now, one hand on the truck, watching the exchange with the careful attention he gave everything. He said, "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," Lucia said. Not unkindly, not kindly either, just flat and clear. "But my mother chose to, and my mother doesn't choose wrong." She stepped back from the door. "Come in. There's food, and the couch folds out, and I want to know everything." Dante Caruso, who had walked into rooms where men trembled at the sight of him, who had held the loyalty of a criminal empire for 2 decades through fear and cunning, and the sheer force of his presence, walked past a 22-year-old girl into her small apartment and did not say a single word. Because there was Rosa realized nothing to say. They were in. The clock was running. Somewhere across the city, Victor Caruso was making calls and finalizing plans and preparing for a night he believed was already won. He had 12 hours, and he had no idea that the one variable he hadn't controlled, the one person he hadn't seen, hadn't counted, hadn't even thought to worry about, was sitting down at a kitchen table across from his father and opening a notebook and starting to write down every name she had ever heard in 11 years of being invisible. Rosa uncapped the pen. She began to write. The notebook filled faster than Rosa expected, not because she had been trying to remember. She had never tried to remember any of it. That was the thing about being invisible. You didn't collect information on purpose. You just existed in a space where information moved freely around you, the way water moves around a stone, and after 11 years, the stone was saturated. She wrote for 40 minutes without stopping. Names, amounts, locations, dates, fragments of conversations she hadn't known she was keeping. A meeting on the second Tuesday of every month in the study off the main hall. A name, Fabrizio, spoken twice in a hushed phone call she'd overheard while changing linens on the third floor. A number 4.7 million said in the kind of flat, factual tone that men use when money has stopped feeling like money. A city, Guadalajara. Another, Rotterdam. Dante sat across from her and watched her write and did not speak, and she could feel the quality of his silence changing as the pages filled, shifting from the careful neutrality of a man reserving judgment into something that had more weight to it, more texture. When she finally set the pen down, he said, "How? How what? How do you remember all of that?" She looked at him. "You remember what matters to you," she said. "For 11 years, survival mattered to me. Staying invisible mattered. Understanding the environment I was working in mattered. So I paid attention." She paused. "No one ever thought to worry about what the housekeeper noticed. That was their mistake, not mine." He looked at the pages. "Half of what you've written, I didn't know you were in the room for those conversations." "I know," she said. "That's the point." Lucia appeared from the kitchen and set a plate down between them, without ceremony, eggs toast, 2 cups of coffee, and then pulled a chair and sat at the end of the table because she was Rosa Medina's daughter. And Rosa Medina's daughter did not wait to be invited into a conversation happening in her own home. "Who is Fabrizio?" she asked, reading the notebook upside down with the fluency of someone used to reading things not meant for her. Dante looked at her sharply. "She's in the room," Rosa said to him before he could object. "And she's already involved. Answer the question." A beat. "Then Fabrizio Conti. He's a federal prosecutor." The word federal landed on the table like something dropped from a height. Lucia's eyebrows went up. "A federal prosecutor is connected to your operation." "Connected is a generous word," Dante said. "He's been on my payroll indirectly for 6 years. He doesn't know who the money comes from. It passes through 3 layers before it gets to him. But he knows to make certain cases disappear, and they do." "And Victor knows about him?" Rosa asked. "Victor knows about everything." The bitterness in his voice was controlled but audible, the way a crack in a wall is controlled but visible. That was the problem with bringing him up through the organization. I taught him where all the pressure points were. Every lever, every buried wire. He picked up the coffee, set it down without drinking. "I thought I was building something to hand to him." "You were," Rosa said. "He just decided not to wait for you to hand it." Dante said nothing. "Fabrizio," she said, returning to it, because grief was a luxury for later, and this was not later. "If Victor has that name, if he moves on the federal connection before tonight's meeting, Then Conti disappears, Dante said. Or flips. Either way, it's a clean break between Victor's operation and anything that could come back on him legally. He was thinking now, she could see it, the operational mind engaging despite the pain, because this was the only language he'd ever been fully fluent in. Victor would move on Conti first, before the territories, before the consolidation. Cut the legal protection so he can demonstrate to the new organization that he's completely clean. So Conti might already know, Lucia said. Both Rosa and Dante looked at her. If Victor's been planning this for 4 years, Lucia said, and Conti is a smart man, which you have to be to make federal cases disappear, then he's probably felt something shifting. Smart people feel shifts even when they don't see them. She shrugged at their expressions. I'm a political science major. We study how power moves. Rosa looked at her daughter for a moment with something that was not quite pride and not quite fear, and was probably an equal measure of both. She's right, Dante said. He sounded almost surprised. Conti reached out to me 2 weeks ago, said he wanted a face-to-face. I put him off. I was dealing with other things. His jaw tightened. He was trying to tell me something. Can you reach him? Rosa asked. Not directly, not safely. Through Petrov. Conti would never take a call from a number he doesn't recognize. He's careful that way. He paused. But he has a routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning, 7 to 8, he runs the same route along the waterfront. Alone. No security because he can't have security without explaining why a federal prosecutor needs a bodyguard. Today is Thursday, Lucia said. Rosa checked her watch. 7:48. He's already out there, she said. The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds before Dante said, I can't go. I can barely walk a straight line. I know, Rosa said. Miguel. Conti doesn't know Miguel. Then who? Rosa was already standing. No, Dante said. It has to be someone Victor wouldn't expect. Someone with no face in your world. She picked up her coat. Tell me what he looks like. Exactly. Rosa. His voice had an edge she hadn't heard before. Not authority, something different. Something that sounded very faintly like alarm. You walk up to a federal prosecutor on a public street and say Dante Caruso sent you, and whatever protection your invisibility has given you is gone. Permanently. I know that. That's a line you don't come back from. I know that too. She looked at him directly. I stopped being invisible the moment I pressed my jacket against your side. That line is already crossed, Mr. Caruso. All I'm doing now is deciding what to do with the new territory. She buttoned her coat. What does he look like? Dante described him. Gray-haired, compact, blue running jacket, always had earphones in, but never actually played anything through them. Another habit of a careful man. Rosa repeated it back once perfectly, and then she looked at her daughter. Do not let him move around unnecessarily, she said. His stitching will hold if he stays still. If he doesn't, it won't. I've got him, Lucia said. I'll be back within the hour. She was out the door before anyone could say another word. She found Conti at the halfway point of his route, exactly where Dante said he'd be moving, at the deliberate pace of a man in his mid-50s who takes his health seriously because he takes his longevity seriously. She fell into step beside him and said quietly and without preamble, Fabrizio Conti. He didn't break stride, but his shoulders went up a fraction. I don't know you. No, but you know the name Dante Caruso. 2 steps of silence. I don't know what he's alive, she said. Conti's stride faltered, just slightly. Enough. I don't know what you mean by, you reached out to him 2 weeks ago. You wanted a meeting. He put you off. You were trying to tell him something, and you didn't get the chance. And then last night you heard he was dead. She kept her voice conversational, her eyes forward. He's not dead, and he needs to know what you were trying to tell him. A long stretch of silence. Their feet on the pavement, the sound of the waterfront. Who are you? Conti asked. Someone he trusts, she said, which was, she realized, completely true and also something that would have been unimaginable 24 hours ago. Conti slowed, stopped. She stopped beside him. He looked at her, really looked at her, the careful evaluating look of a man trained to read people, to sort witnesses into reliable and unreliable in 30 seconds. Victor Caruso came to see me 3 days ago, he said. Rosa kept her face neutral. He told me the operation was transitioning, that his father had decided to step back. Conti's voice was careful, practiced. He made it very clear yet continued cooperation would look like under the new arrangement. A pause. And what the consequences would be if I chose not to cooperate. What kind of consequences? The kind that don't get filed in court. His jaw was tight. He had a file. Photographs, recordings, financial records. Everything. Enough to end my career, my freedom, probably my life. He looked at the water. He didn't just ask for cooperation. He made sure I knew that resistance wasn't an option. Has Victor asked you to do anything yet? Specifically, there's a case, Conti said. It comes to my desk Monday. 3 of Victor's men brought in 6 weeks ago on trafficking charges. Victor wants them out by Tuesday. That was the assignment. He paused. But there's something else. Something he didn't ask for, but that I found on my own. He hesitated. If I give you this and Dante Caruso uses it, what happens to me? Rosa looked at him, measured. That's a question for him to answer. Not me, Tuto, but I'll tell you this, what you have on you right now, the alternative, is a man who already has everything he needs to destroy you and whose first move was to threaten you rather than offer you something. That's the tell. A man who opens with a threat has no intention of honoring any arrangement. He's managing you until he doesn't need to anymore. Conti was quiet. What did you find? She asked. He reached into the inside pocket of his running jacket and produced a folded piece of paper. I work in a federal building. I have access to databases that most people don't know exist. I ran Victor Caruso 3 weeks ago when I first started feeling the shift. He held the paper out. He has a partner. Rosa took the paper, looked at it, a name, an address, a series of transaction dates. This man, Conti said, has been funding Victor's operation for 2 years. Not mob money, clean money, corporate money. He's a legitimate businessman, construction real estate, and he's been laundering Victor's expansion through his development projects. Rosa looked at the name. She knew it. Not from Dante's world, from the notebook she'd been filling this morning. From a fragment of a phone call 3 floors up. 18 months ago, a voice on Dante's end of the line that had gone politely careful the way voices go when someone unexpected is listening, and a name dropped once and covered immediately the name of a developer mentioned alongside the word exposure, in a tone that had made her file it away without knowing why. The same name was on the paper in her hand. He's not just a partner, she said slowly. He's leverage. Victor has been building a legitimate front, so he can operate at a level his father never could. Not just organized crime, actual infrastructure. Actual political access. That's exactly right, Conti said. If Victor completes the takeover tonight, and this man's resources are fully integrated, he stopped. It stops being a crime organization and starts being something much harder to touch. Rosa folded the paper carefully, put it in her coat pocket. I'll take this to Dante. Be available. Don't run and don't make any moves that look like you're running. If Victor's people are watching you running, is the only thing that confirms you're a problem. She left him at the waterfront and moved back through the city with the focused efficiency of someone who has converted fear entirely into motion. When she got back to the apartment, she had been gone 51 minutes. Dante was not sitting at the table where she'd left him. Her heart rate spiked before she saw Lucia standing in the kitchen doorway with the expression of someone who had already anticipated this exact reaction. He's on the phone, Lucia said. Your friend Esperanza called back. I gave him the phone because you weren't here and he said it was time sensitive. He's in the bedroom. Why didn't you? He's a grown man and he looked like he was going to try to walk out and find a phone himself if I didn't give him one, Lucia said. I did the math. Rosa went to the bedroom doorway. Dante was sitting on the edge of the bedphone to his ear, and even from the doorway she could see that whatever Esperanza had told him had changed the quality of everything in his face. He looked up when she appeared. His eyes went to her coat pocket, to where she'd put the folded paper, and she could see he already knew she had something the same way she could already see he had something. I'll call you back, he said into the phone and hung up. You first, Rosa said. Your friend Esperanza, he said. She pulled Victor's legal history. He paused. 3 years ago, there was a case. A witness in a federal investigation, one of my former drivers was prepared to testify about operations I ran in 2019. The case was building. It was serious. His voice was controlled and very quiet. The witness recanted. Case dismissed. I assumed it was Conti's work. A beat. It wasn't. Victor handled it himself, personally, without telling me, without asking, without involving any of the existing structure. His jaw moved. He was 14 months into his own operation by then. He moved on a federal case without my knowledge to demonstrate capability to the people he was recruiting. He showed them he could do what I could do and do it without me. Rosa absorbed this. So the people he recruited, they tested him. They gave him a problem and he solved it, Dante said. On his own. That's how he built loyalty. Not by inheriting my name, but by proving he didn't need it. The grief was back in his voice, deeper now, more specific. He's smarter than I let myself see. He knew I'd look away. He used it. There's more, Rosa said. She took out the folded paper, crossed the room and put it in his hands. He read it. His face went through something she'd never seen on it before. Not shock, not rage, but a kind of rearrangement, like tectonic plates shifting the slow, inevitable movement of something that's been under pressure for too long. Marco Felli, he said. You know him. He approached me 4 years ago, wanted to partner on a development project on the North Waterfront. I said no, I didn't trust the structure of the deal. He looked at the paper. Victor was with me in that meeting. He sat in the corner and said nothing the way he always did when he was learning. A long pause. Afterward, he told me I was being too conservative, that Felli's model was the future, that the business had to evolve or it would calcify. His voice went flat and terrible. I told him he didn't understand the risks. He didn't argue. He stopped. He went around you, Rosa said. He went directly to Felli and built the partnership himself, Dante said. Right in front of me. Right under my name. For 4 years. He set the paper down on the bed beside him. This isn't a takeover. This is a replacement. A complete replacement. He's not trying to run what I built. He's been building something else, something bigger, and he just needed me gone to stop hiding it. The weight of that settled over the room completely. Rosa had lived 53 years, and she had seen men grieve the loss of children, the loss of marriages, the loss of decades-long beliefs. She had seen grief take many shapes, but she had never seen anything quite like what was on Dante Caruso's face right now, the grief not of losing a son, but of discovering that the son had been someone else entirely for years, hiding in plain sight, using the shelter of a father's blind love as camouflage. Dante, she said. It was the first time she'd used his first name. She hadn't planned it. It just came out because what was on his face required a person and not a title. He looked at her. Felli is the lever, she said. If we expose the financial connection before tonight, before Victor completes the consolidation, Felli's participation becomes a liability instead of an asset. A legitimate businessman cannot survive being publicly connected to a mob succession. He'll pull back or he'll break. Victor will see it coming if we move on Felli directly. Not if Conti moves on him, Rosa said. Through the federal system. A quiet flag on Felli's transactions, nothing public, nothing loud, just enough to make Felli's lawyers call him in a panic. She watched Dante's face. Conti wants out from under Victor. Give him a way out that protects him and costs Victor something real. Conti puts a flag on Felli's accounts, Dante said slowly, working through it. Felli's lawyers call him. Felli calls Victor to ask what's happening. Victor has to respond, has to reassure him, has to explain. And in those hours, while he's managing Felli, he's not managing the consolidation. The timing breaks. And the 7 people at the meeting tonight, Rosa said, they're expecting a leaderless organization. What they get instead is you, alive, with a name Marco Felli that tells the room exactly how Victor planned to change the rules without asking any of them. She met his eyes. The men who followed Victor because they wanted to be on the winning side, how many of them will stay when they find out the win was designed to cut them out of the new structure? Dante looked at her for a long moment. Most of them, he said quietly, most of them will turn. Then that's tonight, she said. Miguel's voice came from the other room sharp. Rosa. The tone of it brought her to the doorway fast. Miguel was standing at the window, standing to the side of it, not in front of it, with the instinctive caution of someone who'd learned in the last 8 hours to stop being casual about open windows. "There's a car," he said. "It's been parked across the street since I came in. Engine running, no movement." Rosa crossed to him, looked from the edge of the window frame. Black sedan, 2 occupants visible, parked at an angle that covered both the building entrance and the garage exit. "How long?" she said. "At least 30 minutes. I noticed it when I went to get water, and I've been watching since." Miguel's voice was steady, but his hands weren't. "Tia, how would they know we're here?" Rosa's mind went back. Through every step of the morning, the mud, the truck, Graciella's kitchen, the waterfront, the drive here. She replayed it with the careful exactness of a woman who trusted her own memory. And then she stopped. Graciella's son. The phone. The secondary account Dante had accessed from Graciella's kitchen. "The phone," she said. Dante appeared in the doorway behind her. One look at her face and he went still. "What?" "When you accessed the secondary account from Graciella's kitchen, you said there was no digital record. Paper trail only." She turned to look at him. "But you used the phone to access it." His face changed. "Victor's people had access to your primary system for 2 years," she said. "If they put anything on the device itself, a passive tracker," Dante said. It came out quiet and stripped and furious with himself. "If they put a passive tracker on the hardware, it wouldn't show on the account. It would just report location." She looked at the window, at the car. "They didn't follow us. They tracked us." The room went silent. Then Lucia said from behind both of them, completely level, "Then we have about 10 minutes before whoever is in that car decides to stop waiting." Rosa looked at her daughter, looked at her nephew, looked at the man in the doorway who was supposed to be dead and who was standing on borrowed time in her daughter's apartment while his son's people sat outside in a running car. She picked up the phone, dialed Petrov. He answered in one ring. "Tell me." "We need an exit," she said. "Lucia's building on Crane Street, South Side Service Alley. How fast can you get a vehicle there?" 12 minutes. "Make it 8. She hung up and looked at the room, at the 3 people in it who were all in different ways in this because of her. "We move in 5 minutes, she said. "Dante, can you do stairs?" "Yes." 4 flights down, service exit, straight through the alley. She looked at Miguel. "You go first. Walk to the corner. If you see anyone on foot, call me. If the corner is clear, text one word, clear." Miguel nodded. His face had gone past fear into something else, the focused, simplified calm that appears on the other side of fear when there's no more room for it. "Lucia, I'm not staying here while—" "I know," Rosa said. "I know. You're with me." She looked at her daughter, 22 years old, chin-up eyes, doing the frightened thing they did when she was refusing to be frightened, and felt the full weight of what she had walked her into. Then she set it aside because this was not the moment. "Stay behind me," she said. "Don't stop moving." She picked up the notebook. Every name, every number, every fragment of 11 years of careful and visible attention. She tucked it inside her coat. Dante Caruso was already at the door. "I know this feeling," he said. Not to her, not to anyone in particular, just saying it, running from something I built. Something I handed to someone who turned it around and aimed it at me. He looked at the door handle. "I swore I would never feel this." "How does it feel?" Rosa asked. He was quiet for a moment, then like a reason. He opened the door. They moved. They made it to the service alley with 40 seconds to spare. Rosa knew because she counted. She had been counting since they left the apartment. Not consciously, just the way her mind worked under pressure. The internal metronome that had carried her through 11 years of navigating a world that would have eaten her alive if she'd ever lost track of time or distance or the space between herself and danger. Miguel's text came through as they hit the bottom of the stairwell. One word clear. Petrov's vehicle was already in the alley when they came through the service exit, a gray panel van, nondescript, the kind of vehicle that exists in every city in the world as pure visual noise. The man behind the wheel was short, thick-necked, with a face that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts. And when he saw Dante, he did something Rosa didn't expect. His eyes went red. Not rage, grief. Fast, unguarded. The grief of a man who'd spent 3 hours believing someone was dead and is now confronted with proof that they aren't. He got out of the van, took 3 steps, stopped because Dante had held up one hand. "Not now, Nico," Dante said. His voice was rough but not unkind. "Get us moving first." Petrov swallowed whatever was in his throat, nodded once, got back behind the wheel. They loaded into the van, Rosa first, then Lucia, then Miguel, then Dante last, moving with the deliberate care of a man who knew exactly how much his body had left and was spending it wisely. The door slid shut. The van moved. "Did they make us?" Rosa asked. "Not that I could see," Miguel okayed. "The car across the street didn't move when I came out. They might not know which exit we took." "They'll figure it out in minutes," Dante said. He was breathing harder than he wanted to show. The 4 flights of stairs had cost him. "Where are we going?" "The restaurant," Rosa said. "Esperanza's sister. We moved the meeting up. It was set for 9 tonight." "It was set for 9 tonight when we had 9 tonight," she said. "We don't have 9 tonight anymore. Someone tracked us to Lucia's building. That means Victor knows you're alive." The van went quiet. "How?" Petrov said from the front. "The phone," Dante said. "My mistake. I used a compromised device to access a backup account." "If there was hardware-level tracking—" "There was," Petrov said. "I know because I was the one who warned you about it 6 months ago. I told you Carmine had been spending time with your tech people. I told you something was wrong with the device setup." A pause. The van hit a turn and he corrected smoothly. "You said you'd look into it." The silence that followed had texture to it. "You did tell me," Dante said. "Yes." "I didn't look into it." "No." Rosa said nothing. It was not the moment. But she felt it, the accumulation of small warnings ignored, small moments where a different choice would have changed everything. The particular tragedy of a man who had survived so long by trusting his own instincts that he'd stopped being able to hear other people's. "Nico," Dante said, "the 7 contacts. Can you reach them in the next 2 hours?" 4 of them, yes, directly. The other 3, he hesitated. 2 of them I'm not sure about anymore, boss. Ricci reached out to me last week, feeling around, asking questions about your health, your plans. I played dumb, but he was building to something. "Ricci is one of the 7, Dante said to Rosa. "Can he be cut from the meeting?" she asked. "If I cut him and he's still loyal, he'll know something is wrong. And if you include him and he's not, he tells Victor exactly where we are and what we're doing." Dante looked at his hands. "Ricci has been with me for 18 years. He was at my wedding. He was there when Victor was born." A pause. "He named his first dog after me." "Dante," Rosa said, "I know. His jaw worked. I know. Cut him." She looked at Petrov. "How certain are you about Ricci?" Petrov's eyes found hers in the rearview mirror. "Certain enough that I kept the conversation to myself for a week instead of bringing it to you. That's how certain." "Cut him, so," Dante said again. Quieter this time. "Finished." Petrov nodded and pulled out his own phone, one-handed, already dialing. The calls took 11 minutes total. Rosa counted, and at the end of them, 4 men knew there was a meeting, a location, and a time. 2 hours, enough time to get there without making patterns that anyone watching could read as organized. The restaurant was closed when they arrived, the front locked and the sign off, but Esperanza's sister Carmen was at the side door before the van stopped moving. She was a small woman, round-faced with the specific kind of calm that belongs to people who have run a restaurant for 30 years and believe that most problems, properly approached, can be managed the way you manage a difficult reservation. She looked at all of them. Landed on Dante. "You need food," she said. "I need a table in an hour," he said. "You need both, and you're going to eat first." She stood aside to let them in. "I have soup." Lucia made a sound that was almost a laugh. Rosa understood it. There was something disarming about the absolute authority of a woman who had decided that soup solved things even in the middle of this. They set up in the back room. Rosa laid the notebook open on the table. Dante sat across from her, and Petrov took a chair at the end, and Miguel stood at the door because standing at doors was the thing he'd been doing all morning, and it seemed to help him feel useful, which Rosa appreciated. Lucia sat beside her mother and opened her laptop. "What are you doing?" Rosa asked. "Felli," Lucia said. "Marco Felli's development company. If he's been laundering through real estate projects, there will be public records, permits, Filings, LLC registrations. I can trace the corporate structure. She was already typing. Political science major with a minor in public policy. We learn how to read these things. Rosa looked at her, felt the complicated love of a parent watching their child become capable in ways that are both proud and frightening. Don't go anywhere that requires a login, she said. Public records only, Lucia said. I know. Dante watched this exchange and said nothing, but Rosa caught the way he was watching, not with the suspicion of a man in hostile territory, but with something more complicated, the look of someone encountering a kind of loyalty he'd stopped believing in. Your daughter, he said quietly when Lucia was absorbed in her screen. Yes. She's not what I expected. People rarely are, Rosa said, when you actually look at them. He accepted that, picked up the pen. Let's go through the notebook, he said. Everything you wrote. I need to match what you heard to what I know. There are things I can explain and things I'll need to think about, and I need to know which is which before those four men walk in. They worked through it together. It was strange Rosa had not anticipated how strange it would feel sitting across from this man, speaking to him as an equal, watching him react to the record of everything she'd cataloged from 11 years of proximity. Twice he went still in a way that told her he'd recognized something he hadn't realized she'd heard. Once he put his hand flat on the table and then stared at a name she'd written and didn't move for almost a minute. This one, he said, Pellegrino. The name came up in a call about the Rotterdam connection. Pellegrino is my wife's brother, he said. Rosa had not written what she knew about his wife. She'd kept that separate, not because she didn't know she knew more than she'd written, but because some information felt like it belonged to a different category. More personal, less operational. He's been inside the Rotterdam accounts for how long? She asked. If you heard his name in connection with Rotterdam, Dante stopped, recalculated. 18 months at least, maybe 2 years. His voice was completely flat now. My wife's brother. Is your wife involved? Rosa asked. She kept her voice neutral because the question had to be asked and the way it was asked mattered. A long pause. No, he said. Elena doesn't, she has never been involved. She has never wanted to be. Another pause. But she loves her brother, has always protected and made excuses. Something complicated moved across his face. If Victor used that, if he offered her brother a role, a protected position in exchange for information from inside the house, you don't know that. No. His jaw tightened. But I know Pellegrino, and I know that he has always resented me and always wanted more than he had, and I know that Victor understood that. Victor understands everyone's weakness. He learned it from me. He looked at the table. I taught him to find the pressure point in every person. I just never thought he'd use it here. The door at the front of the restaurant opened. Petrov was on his feet before Rosa could react, one hand inside his jacket, and then he relaxed a single downward degree. The first of the 4 contacts had arrived. His name was Arno Bast. He was 60 years old, built like a man who used to be bigger, with pale eyes and a white scar across one small eyebrow, and the careful, deliberate movement of someone who has learned to take up space efficiently rather than dramatically. He came into the back room and stopped when he saw Dante. He stood there for 3 full seconds without speaking. Then he said, My God. Sit down, Arno, Dante said. They said, I know what they said. Sit down. Arno sat. He kept looking at Dante the way people look at things they can't quite make their eyes accept. How? The important thing is that I am, Dante said, and what I'm about to tell you is going to determine whether that matters. The other 3 arrived within the next 20 minutes, staggered careful, each one going through the same 3-second arrest of movement when they saw who was sitting at the table. Rosa watched each reaction, closely cataloging them the way she cataloged everything. Shock. Relief. In one case, a younger man named Dom, compact and dark-eyed, something that looked like it might be guilt gone so fast she almost missed it. She didn't miss it. She wrote his name in the margin of the notebook. Added a small question mark. Dante spoke for 8 minutes. Flat clear, no theatrical flourishes, no appeals to loyalty or history, just facts. Victor, Feli, the federal connection. The 4-year buildup, the shape of what was planned for tonight. He laid it out like a man reading a blueprint, and the four men around the table absorbed it in the particular silence of people receiving information that is rearranging everything they thought they knew about the ground they were standing on. When he finished, Arno said, "The ports." "Already moving toward Benedetto," Dante confirmed. "If Benedetto seals those routes tonight." "He won't," Rosa said. Four sets of eyes turned to her. She had not spoken since the men arrived, and the sudden attention had a weight to it. Not hostile, but assessing the evaluating attention of men who are used to deciding very quickly whether someone at a table is a resource or a liability. "Benedetto won't seal those routes tonight," she said again, "because Benedetto's going to have a problem. This morning, a federal flag was placed on the financial accounts of Marco Felli's primary holding company." She looked at Dante. He nodded barely. Conti, on the waterfront, had confirmed he would move before noon. "Felli's lawyers will call him within hours. He'll call Victor. Victor will have to manage that conversation, which means he'll be delayed, which means the instructions to Benedetto are going to arrive late or incomplete. Late and incomplete instructions to a man who has spent 12 years only moving when he's certain." She paused. "Benedetto will wait. He always waits when he's not sure." The table was quiet. Arno looked at Dante. "Who is she?" "She works for me," Dante said. "I work it for him," Rosa said without heat. "Currently I'm making decisions." Something shifted in the room. She felt it, a subtle rebalancing, the specific moment when four men who have spent their lives in a world of clearly established hierarchies encounter someone who doesn't fit any of their categories and have to decide what to do about that. Arno almost smiled. "Fair enough," he said. She realized the exact phrase Dante had used to her in Graciella's kitchen a lifetime ago this morning. Dom, the young one with the dark eyes and the almost guilt, had been quiet through all of this. Too quiet. He was watching Dante with an expression that Rosa had been monitoring since he sat down, the careful recalibrating expression of a man whose plan for this morning has just been destroyed by the fact that the person he expected to be dead is sitting across from him, eating soup. Rosa leaned slightly to her right and said quietly close to Lucia's ear, "The young one, Dom. Can you find anything on him quickly?" Lucia didn't look up from her screen. "Last name," Rosa glanced at Dante. "Dom the young one," she said aloud. "Dominic Farr," Dante said without looking up. "Why, just filling in the notebook," she said. Lucia typed, 30 seconds. She tilted the laptop screen a fraction so only Rosa could see. 3 property transfers. Dominic Farr's name on a shell company. The shell company registered to an address. The address shared with another LLC. The second LLC tied to a development project. A development project under Marco Felli's umbrella. Rosa closed the notebook with her hand flat on the cover. "Steady." She breathed once. In, out. And then she looked up. "Dominic," she said. He looked at her. "How long have you been with Felli?" The room went off a cliff. Dom moved not toward her, toward the door. The instinctive motion of someone whose body acts before their mind catches up. And Petrov was already on his feet, already between Dom and the exit, and Dom stopped, and the whole room was on a single held breath. Dante had not moved. He was sitting perfectly still, watching Dominic Farr, with an expression that Rosa had no word for. Not rage, not betrayal, just a vast, still terrible attention. "Sit down," Dante said. Dom sat. "How long?" Dante said. Not a question, a countdown. Dom's jaw worked. He was 29 years old and he was clearly terrified, and also Rosa could see calculating the fast, desperate calculation of someone trying to find a version of this moment they can survive. 14 months, Dom said. "Who brought you to him?" A pause. "Victor," Dom said. One word. It fell into the room and stayed there. Dante looked at him for a long time. "You've been in my organization for 3 years, he said. "I brought you in personally. I vouched for you to men who trusted my judgment." His voice remained completely level, which was somehow worse than rage would have been. "Victor approached you when—" 8 months in, Dom said. He was past calculating now into the register of someone who has decided the only way out is through. He said he told me the organization was changing, that the men who got ahead of the change would be protected. "The men who didn't," he stopped. "The men who didn't," Dante repeated. He said it would be better to be early than sorry. "And tonight, what were you supposed to do tonight?" The silence lasted 5 full seconds. "Report who attended the meeting," Dom said. "Location names." That was all. I was just supposed to report. Just report, Arno said with the specific, quiet disgust of a man who has heard many justifications in his life and is done being interested in them. Rosa looked at Dom and felt no anger. She had no room for it. What she felt was the particular clear-eyed calculation of someone who has just found the thing they needed, wrapped in the problem it came from. "You're going to report," she said. Everyone looked at her. "You're going to contact Victor exactly as planned," she said to Dom. "You're going to tell him the meeting happened. You're going to give him 4 names, the 4 men in this room." She paused. "And you're going to tell him that Dante was not here." Dom stared at her. "Why would—" "Because Victor believes his father is alive and on the run and wounded," she said. "If you confirm that Dante didn't make the meeting, Victor will conclude that he's too injured to function. That the organization is meeting without him, which means the organization is already fracturing." She looked at Dante. "He'll accelerate. He'll move before he's ready. He'll push Benedetto tonight even with the Feli problem unresolved because he'll think the window is now or never. And when he pushes before he's ready," Arno began. "He makes mistakes," Dante said quietly. He was looking at Rosa with an expression she hadn't seen before. "He makes the one mistake I've been waiting for him to make for 20 years. He moves in the open." "There's one more thing," Lucia said. Everyone turned. She turned the laptop around so the table could see. On the screen, a corporate filing. Clean public 4 layers deep, but traceable if you knew what you were looking at. Marco Feli's development company, its subsidiary LLCs, and at the bottom of the chain, a single property address on the north waterfront. "This is where Victor is running tonight's operation from," Lucia said. "Not his apartment, not the estate, this building. It's registered to a subsidiary 2 layers from Feli's main company, but it's the same registered agent on all the filings. He's using his partner's property as a command post because he thinks it's untraceable." She paused. "It took me 22 minutes with public records." The back room of Carmen's restaurant was completely silent. Then Arno said very quietly, "Who trained her?" "Nobody," Rosa said. "She trained herself." Dante Caruso looked at Lucia, looked at Rosa, and then he looked at the notebook on the table between them. 53 years of a woman paying attention, 11 years of a world that thought she was furniture, and something moved across his face that might have been, if such a thing was still possible for a man like him, something close to awe. "Call Conti," he said. "Tell him we have an address." Rosa was already dialing. Outside, somewhere across the city, Victor Caruso was fielding a panicky call from Marco Feli's lawyers, managing a problem that wasn't supposed to exist, running the numbers on a timeline that was slipping. He was fast and he was smart, and he had spent 4 years building something extraordinary. But he had built it around a blind spot the size of a woman he'd never once looked at. And that blind spot was now looking directly at him. Dom made his call from the corner of the room with Petrov 2 feet away, and Arno watching from the door, and Rosa listening to every word. He told Victor what he'd been told to tell him. His voice was steady enough. When he hung up, his hands were shaking. Victor believed him. Rosa knew it from the way Dom's shoulders dropped, the specific physical release of a man who has just successfully delivered a lie to someone terrifying. She filed it, noted it, and then she looked at Dante. "He bought it," she said. "Yes." Dante was already standing, the pain of it visible, but secondary now, running behind everything else in his face. "We have maybe 4 hours before he realizes something is wrong, possibly less if Feli talks to him directly." 4 hours, Rosa said. "That's enough." "For what exactly?" She picked up the notebook, looked at the address Lucia had found, looked at the name Conti had given her on the waterfront, looked at the 7 contacts reduced to 4, and the 4 reduced to 3, and the 3 men who were still loyal sitting around a table in the back of a restaurant, believing for the first time all morning that this was winnable. "To finish it," she said. "On our terms, not his." Dante looked at her. "You've been doing this for 30 years, she said. "You know how it ends when one side moves before it's ready. You know what happens when a man who's been patient for 4 years finally loses his patience." "He makes the mistake," Dante said. "He makes the mistake." She agreed, "and we're standing right where the mistake lands." She picked up her coat. "Let's go," she said. The 4 hours became 2. Rosa knew it the moment Petrov's phone rang in the van, and he answered, and his face went tight in the particular way faces go when the timeline has just been cut in half. He said 3 words into the phone, "How many?" and then listened, and then hung up, and then said without turning around, Feli talked to Victor directly, not through lawyers, directly, 20 minutes ago. "How do you know?" Dante asked. "Because one of Feli's drivers is someone I've been paying for 3 years, Petrov said. "He just texted me the word we agreed on if things went bad fast." Rosa did the math instantly. Victor had the conversation with Feli. Victor now knew the federal flag wasn't random. It was targeted, which meant someone with access had moved on him, which meant the information came from inside, which meant Dom's report about the meeting was suddenly catastrophically suspect. "He's going to call Dom," she said. Everyone in the van looked at Dom, who was sitting in the back corner with his hands clasped between his knees, and the expression of a man who has been running toward a cliff edge in the dark and has just heard the sound of the drop. Dom's phone buzzed. The sound of it in that enclosed space was like a gunshot. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Dom looked at the screen, looked up at Rosa. His face had gone the color of old concrete. "It's him," Dom said. "Answer it," Rosa said. "He'll know. If he's already suspicious, he'll know something is wrong if you don't answer," she said. Answered it. 2 sentences. "You were levying the restaurant. Everything is confirmed." "What if he asks something I can't?" "Dom." Her voice was quiet and absolute. 2 sentences. That's all. You can do 2 sentences. Dom answered, put the phone to his ear. "Yeah." A pause. His jaw worked. "Just leaving now. Everything's confirmed." Another pause, longer this time, and Rosa watched his face during it the way she watched everything, cataloging every micro-movement. His eyes went to the roof of the van. His breath rate changed. Then, "Yeah, I'll check in later." He hung up. The silence lasted 1 second. "He didn't believe me," Dom said. "No," Rosa agreed. "How much time do we have?" "He asked which direction I was heading," Dom said. "I said north." He said, "Good, stay north." He looked at her. "That means he's sending someone to look for me going north. It's a tell. He checks people that way, gives them false information, and watches if they correct it or follow it." "So he knows the meeting happened and he knows you're compromised," Dante said from the front seat. He wasn't angry. He was past anger, operating now in the cold, clean space on the other side of it. "How long before he moves on the waterfront building?" "He won't abandon it," Rosa said before anyone else could answer. "It's his command post. Everything he's built for 4 years runs through that location tonight. He won't abandon it, he'll fortify it. He'll accelerate the consolidation lock down the building, bring in more of his people." She paused. "That's what we need. We need him locked inside a building he thinks is a fortress," Arno said slowly from the back. "We need him locked inside a building that Conti has an address for," Rosa said. "A building registered to a company tied to a man who is currently the subject of a federal financial flag. A building that, if Conti makes one more call, becomes a location of active federal interest." Dante turned to look at her fully. "You want to hand him to the feds?" "I want to hand the building to the feds," she said. "What's inside the building, the communications, the financial records, the chain of command, he's spent 4 years building all of it, documented in one place. On the one night he's brought every piece of it together." She met his eyes. "You don't destroy Victor by shooting him, Dante. You destroy him by making everything he built into evidence." The van was completely silent. "He goes to prison," Dante said. "Yes. And the organization fractures without the Feli money behind it," she said. "The men who followed him because they thought he was the future, they scatter when the future turns into a federal indictment." She held his gaze. "You told me yourself. They follow the winning side. Make him the losing side." Another silence. Longer. She could feel the weight of it, not just tactical calculation, but something older and heavier. A father deciding what to do with a son. The specific, impossible grief of that choice. "He'll know it was me," Dante said quietly. "Yes," she said. "He'll spend however many years he gets inside knowing his own father?" "Yes." "And you think I think," Rosa said carefully, "that a man who called his father 4 hours before having him shot and said, 'Stay in, get some rest,' made a choice, and choices have weight." She paused. "You didn't make this. He did." Dante looked out the windshield at the city moving past. His face was doing the thing it had been doing all day, the constant internal rearrangement of a man processing something too large for any single emotion to hold. Then he said, "Call Conti." Rosa called Conti. He answered on the first ring like a man who had been holding his phone and waiting, which was exactly what he'd been doing. "I need you to make one more move," she said. The address Lucia found, the waterfront building. She gave him the address. "I need federal eyes on it tonight, not tomorrow. Tonight." A pause. "On what grounds?" "Financial crimes ongoing. The flag on Felly's accounts ties directly to that address. It's in the corporate filings public record. Your office can pull it in under an hour." Another pause. "You wanted a way out from under Victor, Mr. Conti. This is the way out. You bring this case, you're the prosecutor who built it. Everything before this, everything you did for Dante gets buried under what you do tonight." The silence on the other end was long enough that she thought she'd miscalculated, that the ask was too much, the risk too visible, the man too frightened. Then Conti said, "I need 2 hours." "You have 90 minutes, she said and hung up. Petrov looked at her in the rearview mirror. "You just told a federal prosecutor he had 90 minutes. "He has 90 minutes, she said. "What if he can't? Then we find another way." "But he can. He knows the system well enough to move fast when he needs to. He's been making things disappear in that system for 6 years. Making something appear works the same direction, just in reverse." She looked at her watch. "Drive to the south end of the waterfront, far enough from the building to be invisible, close enough to see what happens when the lights show up." Petrov drove. In the back of the van, Dom sat very still and said nothing, which was the first genuinely intelligent thing he had done all day. Arno had his eyes closed, either resting or praying. Rosa couldn't tell and didn't ask. Miguel was on his phone texting someone, and Rosa decided not to ask who because she needed him calm and functional, and sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a young man who is frightened is let him have the one thing that makes him feel less frightened. Lucia had not looked up from her laptop for 20 minutes. "What are you doing?" Rosa asked. "Building a document," Lucia said. "Everything I found in the public records, the corporate chain, the addresses, the transaction dates, clean-cited, organized." She didn't look up. If Conti's case goes anywhere, someone is going to need to explain how a federal prosecutor found a waterfront address from a public records search in under an hour. I'm making sure that explanation exists and is bulletproof. Rosa looked at her daughter. "That's very smart," she said. Lucia glanced up. "I learned from someone who spent 11 years memorizing things nobody thought mattered." She went back to typing. Go figure. They were parked on the south end of the waterfront for 40 minutes when Dante said quietly, "He called me again." Rosa turned. He was looking at his phone, the restored compromised phone they'd kept because it was still the fastest way to receive information from the people who didn't know to use other channels. "Victor," she said. "Yes." He looked at the screen. Not a call, a text. 4 words. He sent 4 words. "What does it say?" Dante looked up. His face was in the specific configuration of a man who has received something he was both expecting and not ready for. "I know you're alive," he said. The van went still. "That's all," Petrov said. "That's all," Dante said. Rosa thought about it. 4 words. No threat attached. No demand. No instruction. Just a statement sent to a man his son believed was hiding wounded, outmaneuvered. 4 words that were not a threat, but something more unsettling than a threat, an acknowledgement. "I see you, I know you're there, come out or don't, because either way I've already won." "He's trying to rattle you," Miguel said. "Yes," Dante said, "and he's succeeding, so let's not pretend otherwise." He set the phone down. He knows I'm alive. He knows the meeting happened. He knows Dom is compromised. And he's still in that building, which means he still believes the operation is intact enough to run. He looked at Rosa. He's afraid. That's what this message is. When Victor is afraid, he gets loud. He always has. "Don't answer it," Rosa said. "I know." "Not yet, not until Conti." And then the lights appeared. Not 1 car. Not 2. 4 vehicles, dark, moving fast and without sirens, along the North Waterfront Road, the specific controlled urgency of federal agents who have a warrant and a timeline, and no interest in announcing themselves to the neighborhood. They moved into position around the waterfront building with the practiced efficiency of people who have done this before, and Rosa watched through the van windshield as the building went from an ordinary structure in the night to the center of something that could not be undone. 90 minutes, Petrov said almost to himself. She said 90 minutes. 83, Rosa said. A beat. Is she always like this? Arno asked, looking at Dante. I don't know, Dante said. I didn't know she existed until this morning. Inside the building, Rosa couldn't see inside, but she didn't need to because she knew what was happening from the way the lights came on all at once on the second floor, from the sound that was not quite audible at this distance, but that she felt more than heard from the single figure that appeared briefly at a second floor window and then pulled back inside the building. Victor Caruso was discovering that the fortress he'd built for 4 years had a door in it, and the door was open, and the people coming through it were not the people he'd planned for. Dante watched the building without speaking. Rosa watched him watch it. She had been watching him for 11 years. She had never seen his face do what it was doing right now. Not the controlled flatness of a powerful man managing a situation, not the operational calculation of a crime boss solving a problem, but something entirely unguarded. The grief of a father. The specific and terrible grief of a man watching the consequence of something that started the moment he first held a son in his hands and decided on some fundamental level to believe that love was enough to outpace damage. Dante, she said. He looked at her. You didn't cause this, she said. No, he agreed. But I didn't stop it either. And the distance between those two things is not as large as I'd like it to be. She didn't argue with that. It was true and he knew it, and she had never been the kind of woman who traded truth for comfort. What happens now, Miguel said from the driver's seat, with him? After tonight, I mean. Victor goes to prison, the organization, and what happens? It breaks up, Dante said. The parts that can survive without the Felly money go back to operating the way they operated before. The parts that can't. He stopped. A lot of people are going to have to make decisions very quickly about what they do next. And you, Gwent? Rosa asked. He was quiet for a moment. I'm a man with 2 bullet wounds who was left for dead in his own garden by his own son, he said. What I do next depends on a number of things I can't predict right now. Will you rebuild? I don't know. He said it without deflection, without the reflexive assertion of a powerful man, just honest uncertainty, flat and real. A week ago, I would have said yes without thinking. Tonight, he looked at his hands. Tonight, I'm less certain about what I want to rebuild and what I should let go. Something in that landed differently than anything else he'd said all day. Not the strategic calculation, not the cold operational thinking, just a man at the edge of something, standing at the place where one life ends and whatever comes next hasn't been named yet. Rosa understood it. She was standing at the same edge for different reasons. Her phone buzzed. Conti. She answered. It's done, he said. His voice was different than it had been on the waterfront, compressed, exhilarated, the adrenaline of a man who has just done the most consequential thing of his professional life. He was inside. Victor Caruso, 4 of his lieutenants, and enough documentation to build a case that doesn't need my testimony or anyone else's. The records were right there, financial flows, communications logs, Felly's transaction records. He kept everything in one place because he thought the building was clean. A pause. It wasn't clean. No, Rosa said. It wasn't. The Felly flag made it accessible. My office had grounds inside an hour. I want you to know, whatever comes out of this, whatever is asked about how the information moved tonight. It came from a federal financial flag on a public record, Rosa said. My daughter documented the whole chain. Clean-sighted, unimpeachable. A long pause. Your daughter. 22 years old, Rosa said. Political science major. Minor in public policy. Another pause shorter. Tell her she has a career if she wants one. She hung up. She relayed it to the van in 3 sentences. Arno closed his eyes again, definitely praying this time. Petrov's hands loosened on the steering wheel in a way that suggested they'd been tight since he sat down. Miguel exhaled something that wasn't quite a word, and Dante Caruso sat completely still and looked at the waterfront building with its lit windows and its federal vehicles and the figure of his son somewhere inside it. And he didn't speak, and Rosa did not prompt him to, because this was one moment she was not going to fill with efficiency. It lasted about 2 minutes. Then he said, I want to go back. Where? She asked. The estate. He looked at her. It's my house. I want to go back to my house. It might not be. It's my house, he said again with a quietness that was not quite stubbornness and not quite grief and was probably both. Whatever comes after tonight, it starts there, not in a van on the south waterfront. Rosa looked at him, calculated. The guards who had been cleared were Victor's people. Victor's people were now occupied with more immediate problems. The property was likely empty. Likely, not certainly. Petrov, she said, can you get 2 of your people to the estate in the next 30 minutes? Already thinking it, Petrov said. He was dialing before she finished the sentence. They drove. The city moved past them in its ordinary nighttime configuration lights, traffic people heading home or heading out, the whole enormous, indifferent machinery of a place that had no idea that something had cracked open and reset itself tonight in a van, in a restaurant back room, and a federal operation on the north waterfront. Lucia fell asleep against Rosa's shoulder somewhere in the middle of the drive. She was 22 years old, and she had been awake since before 7 in the morning, and she had built a corporate map that helped bring down a criminal operation, and she fell asleep the way young people fall asleep instantly, completely, with the total trust of a body that has decided it's finally safe. Rosa put her arm around her daughter and held her and did not move for the rest of the drive. When they pulled up to the estate, Petrov's 2 men were already at the gate. The property was empty, not abandoned, just empty. The specific stillness of a place between one thing and the next. The guards Victor had installed were gone. Whether they'd run, or been recalled, or simply made their own calculation about which way the night had gone, Rosa didn't know. They went in. Dante walked through the front door of his own house and stopped in the entrance hall and stood there with his hand on the wall and his eyes moving over everything, the way eyes move over things you thought you'd never see again. Rosa watched him from the doorway and did not go in immediately because this was a moment that belonged to him. Then he looked at her. Come in, he said. She came in. Miguel and Arno and Petrov moved through the house with the practical efficiency of men, securing a space, checking rooms, testing locks, doing the things that needed doing without being asked. Dom had been left at the restaurant under Arno's instruction with very clear guidance about what was expected of him in the weeks ahead, which Dom had accepted with the profound relief of a man who has been given a survivable option when he expected none. Lucia had woken up when the van stopped and was now sitting in the kitchen with a glass of water, looking at the room the way people look at places they have heard about but never seen. Rosa sat at the kitchen table, the same kitchen where she had worked for 11 years, where she had made coffee and cleaned surfaces and been so completely invisible that a man had sat 3 feet away from her and planned the murder of his own father without dropping his voice. She thought about that, about the specific nature of invisibility, what it costs and what it provides, the long, complicated tax of being unseen. Dante sat across from her, same table, different morning. You saved my life, he said. Yes. I want to know, and I need you to be honest what you want. Not what's fair, not what's appropriate, what you actually want. Rosa looked at him. She had spent the entire day reacting, calculating, moving, and it occurred to her now that she had not once asked herself that specific question. My daughter stays safe, she said. Whatever comes out of tonight, whatever Victor says or does from inside a federal holding cell, my daughter's name stays completely clear. Lucia was a private citizen doing public records research, that's all. Done, he said immediately. Miguel, too. Done, Graciela and her son. Done, she paused. And Esperanza. She pulled information on Victor. She did it because I asked her. She didn't know why. She's protected, he said, all of them. He held her gaze. And you? I'll manage myself. Rosa. I have been managing myself for 53 years, Dante. I'm not going to stop now because I spent one night in a van with a crime boss. Something crossed his face that after everything, she recognized now the particular expression he made when someone said something true in a way he hadn't expected. What do you actually want, he said again, for yourself. She thought about it. Genuinely, the way she thought about things when she let herself without the filter of what was practical or realistic or wise. I want to not be invisible, she said. I spent 11 years in this house as furniture. I would like to spend whatever comes next as a person. She held his gaze. And I would like my daughter to see that that's possible, that you can be unseen for a time and still become visible on your own terms. He was quiet for a moment. Then, the information in your notebook, the names, the accounts, the connections, that's worth more than you know. In the right hands. What hands? Mine, he paused. Or whoever I choose to give it to. There are people I've been paying for years to protect me. Most of them didn't protect me. But some of them, the ones who didn't know, the ones who never had the chance, those relationships still have value. He looked at the notebook sitting on the table between them, 53 years of careful attention compressed into 30 pages. What you built in that book is a map of everything I built and everything that was built against me. That's leverage, real leverage, not the kind that disappears when someone pulls a trigger. I'm not interested in leverage, Rosa said. I know, he said. That's why I trust you with it. The word trust landed in the room quietly without drama, the way real things often land, not the way you expect them to when you've been waiting for them. Rosa looked at the notebook. She thought about the last 24 hours, the mud and the rain, and Graciella's kitchen, and the waterfront, and the van and the restaurant, and her daughter asleep against her shoulder in the dark. She thought about what it had cost, what it had changed. The line that Dante had told her she couldn't come back from, and the fact that she didn't want to come back from it, and the fact that she hadn't known that about herself until right now. I have one condition, she said. Name it. My daughter knows nothing more than she already knows. She found some corporate records and went home. That's where her story ends. And your story, my story, Rosa said, is my own. Dante looked at her for a long time. Outside, somewhere in the house, she could hear Petrov talking quietly into his phone, the low murmur of a man rebuilding something from the ground floor. She could hear Miguel in the hall moving around, doing the thing he did when he needed to feel useful. She could hear very faintly Lucia in the kitchen, her glass on the counter, a small, ordinary sound in a large, complicated night. All right, Dante said. 2 words. Quiet final, the specific weight of a decision that doesn't need more than 2 words to be real. Rosa picked up the notebook, put it inside her coat, stood. I need to take my daughter home, she said. I know. She looked at him one more time. The man who had been left for dead in his own garden. The man she had pulled out of the mud for reasons she was still working out the full shape of. He looked like what he was, a man at 60 who has survived something that should have finished him and is now sitting with the complete rearrangement of everything he thought his life was working out. What comes next? Dante, she said. He looked up. Get the second bullet out, she said. Tonight, call a real surgeon. Don't wait. He almost smiled. It was the closest thing to a real smile she had seen on his face all day, and it looked unexpectedly, startlingly like a man who might have been somebody very different if things had gone differently a very long time ago. Yes, ma'am, he said. She went to the kitchen, put her hand on her daughter's shoulder. Lucia looked up, read her mother's face, and stood without a word. They walked out of the house together through the front door. The same front door Rosa had entered through 500 times in 11 years, as a woman with her eyes down and her presence reduced to function, and this time she walked through it upright, with her daughter beside her and her coat buttoned and the notebook against her chest. Miguel was waiting at the van. He opened the door. She got in. He drove them home in the early hours of the morning, the city quiet around them, the way cities go quiet when the night has run out of things to do. Lucia fell back asleep in the seat beside her mother, one hand loose in her lap, her face completely at peace, the way you sleep when you are young and you have done something hard and it is over. Rosa did not sleep. She looked out the window at the city she had lived in for 21 years, a city she had navigated quietly and carefully, always conscious of the space she was taking up, always calibrating her visibility against her safety. She thought about the woman who had come to this country with $40 and a phone number. She thought about what that woman would think of this night. She thought about 11 years of memorizing things nobody thought mattered, and one night when they mattered more than anything. She thought about the fact that she had walked into Dante Caruso's garden in the rain to check a drain and walked out of it with a dead man's hand against her chest and a war in her pocket and had not flinched once. Not because she was fearless, because she was practical, because she understood in the way that women who have survived everything understand that fear and function are not opposites. You can be terrified and still be the most capable person in the room. You can be invisible for 11 years and still see everything. And you can kneel in the mud next to a man the world has written off and press your hands against his chest and say, "Not tonight," and mean it so completely that the world has no choice but to agree. The van turned onto her street. Miguel slowed, stopped. Lucia woke, gathered herself, got out without being asked. Rosa followed. She stood on the sidewalk outside her building in the early morning air, coat button notebook inside it, her daughter beside her nephew behind them both, and she looked at the ordinary street and the ordinary morning, coming pale and clear over the ordinary rooftops, and she breathed. In, out. 53 years old, one night. A dead man she'd pulled back to life, a son she'd helped put in a cell, a city that had no idea any of it had happened, and a notebook full of secrets that was going to matter for a very long time. She put her hand on her daughter's back and walked her inside. Rosa Medina had spent 11 years being invisible. She had spent one night being unstoppable. And when the door closed behind her and the ordinary life of the building hummed around her, the elevator, the neighbors, the smell of someone's coffee 2 floors up, she understood with the quiet certainty of a woman who had always trusted what she knew, that there was no going back to invisible. She had chosen that the moment she pressed her hands against his chest, and she would not have changed it for anything in the world.